Okay, now which screen do I have up there? Do you have the opening screen for me up there?
You're good,
You
Mike.
have the one, it's not the presentation slide one, it's the one that you can see the next one.
Okay. Shoot. So there was a way of switching that.
If you want to do the middle square on the bottom, that's presentation, I think. But no, it's the same as what you got.
Same as what I had. That's
Yeah,
what I
same.
expected. Okay. So you have the one up there where that shows topics, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and that's filling up the screen.
No,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go with the way it is here.
Yep.
So, what I wanted to do is just do a nice little sweet program that basically uh, goes through and talks a little bit about selecting VHF UHF radio. Um, this winter, I've had a bunch of people talking to me about what kind of VHF UHF radio to end up getting and what should I put on it. These were all newbies out there, and so I had put together this program and used it a couple places here, and I thought I'd just go ahead and use it here. Sometimes a little bit of a review is not such a bad thing. So um, so I'm going to kind of talk about VHF UHF radios, base stations, mobile handhelds. It's just a general discussion of what features you might want, and this is going to be a little bit of an open discussion as far as what features personally you care about. A little bit about programming it and talking about accessories and some antennas out there that you might want to end up using for it. So this is me talking. This is what I consider really important is that I always like whatever I'm getting, either a handheld or a mobile or base station for VHF, UHF, I always have to end up getting both a VHF, UHF transceiver. That means 2 meters and 77 centimeters. Um, I know that it does add a few extra bucks to the cost of it. Usually when you add that extra transmitter in there, that extra band, it adds probably another 50 to 100 bucks onto that radio. But for me, there's too many places where, or I should, let me back up to, all the repeaters for VHF, all of those frequencies are used. So there's nothing else more that they can use. So everybody's having to move up to UHF to add on any kind of new repeaters. And sometimes there's places that need filling that you kind of need to have that darn UHF in there. So I always like to have one that has the higher frequencies in there. The other thing is that I really like having, and that's a dual receiver. So one that does both VHF, UHF, and then does the various combinations of that. Um, it gives me the ability to listen to two things at the same time because sometimes I may be listening to NOAA to get a little update on NOAA and then also monitoring another repeater while I'm out doing something. So it gives me a little bit of dual diversity there to listen to multiple things at one time. Being that I do a lot of hiking, backpacking, and stuff like that, having something that is waterproof is really important. Some of the newer radios that are coming out that the IPXX represents a certain amount of contamination that can or cannot get into your radio. So an IP67 says it's waterproof. So I can take my radio, dump it into a bucket of water. Typically, it gets dumped in a stream when I stumble or something like that. But I can pull it out, and as long as I don't go for about 30 minutes, it doesn't do anything. Now, there's certain sacrifices when you do that. Usually, the speaker isn't quite as good, and also the microphone isn't quite as good. So sometimes there's compromises when you want to step up to the higher levels of waterproofing, but it's still important for me. Another one is DTMF tones. That's the same kind of dial tones or same kind of tones you have on the old push button phone system there. I do have some equipment around the valley here that and repeaters that I can use DTMF tones and get access to certain internal parts of some of those repeaters. So that's always important to me. Um, the next thing is that, like we know that those Bofang radios, you get just 100 memories in there, and that's it. And I always struggle to try and get enough stuff in there on those on just 100 channels. That's usually just way too small for me. I like the ones that are in 250, 500 channels there, and then also have some way of managing the memory banks on that or putting things in different memory banks so I can have things where I have a selection of repeaters and frequencies that I use for the valley. I have some that I use on the coast. I have some when I'm hiking the Cascades. I have some when I'm over in eastern Oregon or I'm in Utah or Idaho or something like that. So those are some of the things that I consider a key feature that I just must have whenever I'm selecting that a VHF UHF radio. So does anybody else have any thoughts about other things that are important to you when you come about selecting those kinds of radios? Speak now.
Mike, I always focus on the transmit and receive quality. And the receive is, under a noisy environment. And I don't mean receive as in it can hear weak signals. I mean, I can hear it when it's on audio,
Yep.
RF output. So I actually tend to go for the front firing speakers on the mobile radios if I have one, or mounting an external speaker looking, right at me so that that highway noise can, I can get it still.
Yep. Good point, sir.
So another
And
thing for handhelds for me is uh, there was a while where I was really excited about dual channel in addition
mhm.
to the dual band. And after doing everything that I'd done, I have come to the conclusion that for a handheld, I actually want one channel so I can listen to it well and not have to fiddle around with going back and forth on that stuff.
Gotcha. Anybody else out there?
I'll add one more item, and it was, thanks, Anthony, you reminded me of something. Um, if you're not willing to sit down and read the manual and be kind of self-trained on how the EHT operates, you should keep it as simple as possible when you bring it to the field, because then if you need to go to a camp channel, you don't have to pull out your 300-page manual to figure out how to put it in simplex.
That's a real good point. Some of them like those bow things when it comes to programming it with the keypad, um, you gotta be. It's horrible. It's horrible. Very complicated, very convoluted. And when you're out in the field, you don't need to have that kind of stuff. You don't want it. You want it to be simple and straightforward to be able to program the stuff. Okay, move on. So anyway, here's a couple pictures. The guy on the left is the Woshan. That's a dual band radio there, showing the two different displays that you have up there. The guy on the right is a mobile base station there. I do have one of those, one of the Yaesus on the right there that I really like it. It's in my truck, and it also provides APRS and some other features on there that's really, really nice.
Mike,
Yo,
I think I'm not sure. I think you're behind one slide or something because I'm seeing like the main slide and then there's like a preview of the next slide. I think, at least on my screen, that's the way it is. I'm not sure if that's what it is on yours.
so is that the
You
way
see that?
everybody's seeing it?
In other words, I see most wanted features slide, and then the next slide has got the two pictures of the radios, but that's like it seems like it's like the next slide coming up. Is that
Uh,
what everybody else is saying, or is it just me? So Paul, you're okay with that? Okay. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm seeing it.
okay. I need to figure out how to fix that. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but I'll fix that the next time around. Come on.
I know what that's like. I've had a lot of problems with PowerPoint and this kind of stuff. So
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about base stations and handhelds. So actually, in functionality, there's not a whole lot difference between base station and a handheld. They're pretty much functionally equivalent as far as features that you have. Of course, you have bigger knobs, and you normally on a base station you have, excuse me, on base stations you'll have bigger knobs, and it's a little easier to get access to them, and probably more knobs for controlling things. But the big difference is the the amount of power those things put out. Obviously, a handheld, the best you're going to get is probably about 5 watts out of it. Base station, you're going to get about 50 watts out of it, and that 50 watts makes a whole lot of difference. I have another slide that'll come up and show you kind of the difference. Now, there for handhelds, kind of the entry cost for handhelds is down around $40, $40 to $80. You can get some pretty decent, inexpensive handhelds, but they're pretty stingy on features. Where like on a base station, a basic base station is going to cost you probably about 100, 120, 100, about 140 bucks on up for a decent base station. But feature-wise, these days, it's amazing what they cram into a little tiny box here. So here's a little chart here of that kind of shows the valley that I kind of live in. And so down at the very bottom of the valley, you see a little balloon there. Can I swoop on the left side? See that? So this is a slide here showing what you can get with 5 watts. You can get things up around the left or the right side of the valley there, up along the side of the mountains there, but you can't get anything right down the center of the valley. I mean, that's basically a dead zone if you're using just a 5-watt rig. And this is with a little bit of elevation. Now the slide over on the right side is with 50 watts and shows that, man, you can paint that whole hillside. You can get the full bottom of that valley all the way out to the end and past. In other words, with that 50 watts, that end of the valley points to the South Hills of Salem there. And that um, and I can get into the repeaters all the way into Salem there just fine. When it comes to getting into Eugene and trying to get south, I got too much, got 1,500 feet worth of hills on it. You just can't do it. So that kind of shows you a little bit of difference on what you get for coverage from a 5-watt HT and a 50-watt base station. So programming, there's actually, and we're not talking about having to write programs. You're talking about being able to configure it and put in frequencies on who and where you want to talk to. That rather than having to dial all this stuff in by hand, all it is usually just a rotation of a switch or some up and down keys to be able to find the frequencies that you want to work on. So there's 3 main softwares. There's Chirp out there, there's RT Systems, and the manufacturer's software. I have I have never been happy with any of the manufacturer's software. It always basically barely covers the functionality of uh, the system that you purchase. Chirp is an open source. It doesn't cost you anything, free. Um, it has some idiosyncrasies on there, but once you learn how to work around it, it works pretty darn good for programming the vast majority of the uh, systems that you might have. RT Systems is going to cost you anywhere between 25 and 50 bucks. Someone mentioned the other night that RT Systems used to require that you could only use their programming cable. So programming cable like this here. So it doesn't show up very well with the stuff going on. But anyway, it but RT System is saying, sounds like these days is saying that they're not forcing that. We seem to have got past all these counterfeited and bad actors out there for the FTDI or for the USB chip in there. So RT System is really good. I use it a lot. I got most of my radios on that. I have a well, I'll get into that in a little bit. So So what are we programming when we talk about programming a radio? So we talk about configuration, we talk about how to maybe set up squelch, how to set up um, if you're doing a scan, if you want to stop on the first busy channel, or you want to set a timeout and skip past that channel there. So those are the kind of things that you can program as far as the radio. So there's two parts to that. You have the system part of it, the radio part, and then you have what's known as memory banks that are called channels. And in the channels, you're setting up frequencies, you're setting up repeaters, you're setting up simplex frequencies. And then on top of that, if you have a radio that has a big enough uh, memory in that thing, you can also divide that memory up into memory banks so you can put them into logical organizations, such as a memory bank for all the repeaters in the Willamette Valley, or for on the coast, or for in the Eastern Oregon. So it's a really nice way of organizing things. The one key thing that I always look for these pieces of software, and that's the ability to import and export your memory banks or your channels. The key thing is there is that when you export it, practically all of these, the better stuff, except for the manufacturers, I rarely, if ever, see that included in the manufacturer's software. But for Chirp, RT System allows you to export it. It gets exported into a commented delimited file. You can get in there with Excel, Microsoft Excel, or any type of spreadsheet program that accepts that format, and you can get in there and edit that. You can easily edit, add in new channels, move things around, add comments to the end of it. And then when you get finished, you just save it to your disk and then import that into your radios. So with RT systems, I have one set of my radio frequencies and the way that I like it configured, and then I can suck that up into all my different radios. So all my different radios, and I have like 7 different kinds of radios that are all unique. But by having that import capability, then every channel is exactly the same on all those radios. And thereby I can go through there and know what channel I want to go to, and know that, hey, it's going to be a PRA repeater, or it's going to be a Salem repeater. So what kind of things can you set up for channels? Naturally, everybody always sets up, and this is for me, this is the way I like doing things, and everybody's going to have a different way of looking at it. You always stick in repeaters. I always stick in both simplex for the 2 meter and 70 centimeter bands. So I always put in all the simplex frequencies. I also put in NOAA. So if you need have an emergency event, or if I'm hiking through the Cascades and I see some big black clouds heading my way, I might want to call up NOAA and look at the weather, find out from the weather what's headed my direction. If I need to get my butt off the hilltop, or if this is just going to pass through. I also like including, usually with these kinds of radios, you can usually get to your FM broadcast stations. So I like to kind of stick in 2, 3, or 4 FM broadcast stations in there to listen to it. There are a very few HTs that will allow you to pick up AM broadcasts, but they are out there. I like putting that in. The next couple are police, fire, and ambulance. Now, Corvallis police still have not moved over to digital. A lot of the police organizations around the valley have moved over to digital, so we're not going to be able to listen to that kind of stuff. But for Corvallis, I like to include the police, the fire, and the emergency services for the uh, for the wagon that comes along and picks up body pieces. So where do you get this information? How do you end up finding all this information that you want to load into your little HT? So there's lots of resources out there. Probably my favorite one is that repeaterbook.com. And there you can go on their site and narrow things down to your local area. You can say how far out you want to go. You can also export the stuff. If you get on the site and log into the site there, give them some few credentials, then you can go ahead and export that into a commented delimited list, and then you can use that to fold that into uh, your all your frequencies that you want to end up listening to. ARL repeater book directory that also allows you to do it. There's stuff out there like, let's say you're planning a trip between Corvallis and Denver, and you can map out the route you want to take, and the product will go through there and mine all the repeaters that are on your route, and that'll dump it into a commented delimited list that you can then suck it into your programming software. But if you don't find exactly what you want, do a little Googling, and most likely you can find it. Another cool place, Ted, I don't know if you still do this, but like you had a way of exporting all the peak radio stuff, all the repeaters on that, and but there's lots of hams around the area that have a really good cookbook as far as what they keep on their radios, and I'm sure that they would be willing to export that for you if you find something there that works well for you. Okay, here's a couple little diagrams here. Um, these are some screenshots. This is from Chirp. So virtually all this programming software that you have out there all have a common format. You have memories or channels. They may call it something different. And then you have settings. Settings are all the radio programming things that you're setting on if you want certain alarms, or if you want to set your squelch, the maximum amount of time that you can transmit. So those are unique individual things for that particular radio. Oh, if it has APRS, all the APRS settings. So that's the top form there. The bottom form is memories, and you can see everything starts out with frequencies along the left side, and you can give it a two or excuse me, a 6 or 7, I guess a 7 or 8 character name. So that name you're kind of stuck with a small amount of information. So what I usually do is out on the right side, that comment area, I usually fill out that comment area with information that really describes what that repeater is. Now, once you've sucked that information up into your programming program, and when you download it, all that comment information disappears. That's why I kind of like to always keep a master chart that's a commented delimited list that I can print out. So I typically go through there and I'll print out a list of everything that's um, in that device there that includes the comment, and that just goes into my backpack or into my camper or someplace where I can find the stuff and figure out exactly what name or what channel number. You can see clear over on the left-hand number that always has a sequential number, and that'll tell me what channel number to end up going to find that information. Okay, let's talk a quick little bit about accessories. So if you have an HT, you got to have a programming cable. Um, there's a few HTs that are coming out that has an actual SD card. So that's a little micro SD card about the size of your fingernail, and then you can program that on your computer, and then save it, and then suck it up with a little menu option there in the HT. You always want to have at least one extra battery. Sometimes it might have more if you're going to have an extended trip and not have the ability to recharge those things. Um, Everybody, I think, pretty much knows that you always want to upgrade your antenna. If you upgrade your antenna, But with something that's a little better on that, you can get about twice the distance out of that by just upgrading the antenna so to something a little bit better. Some people like the optional detachable speaker microphone. Um, Out of all of those that I have bought for my HTs, I've only had one of them that actually sounds decent. The microphones are really tinny. The speakers are really sad as far as the quality that you get out of them. Uh, and they're really, really cheaply made. But so beware that whatever you're buying, the quality may vary quite a bit. But there you can occasionally find one that works well. But look at the reviews. Look at the reviews for that your product. See what people are saying about that speaker mic. Okay, base stations. When you buy a base station, a couple things you probably don't think about, but you obviously need a programming cable there, but you also are going to need some kind of a 12-volt supply. All your VHF, UHF kind of base stations, mobiles always run off of 12 volts. So you will need a suitable 12-volt power supply that can produce anywhere from probably about 20 to 25 amps. Now, this winter I've run across a couple interesting things where a guy came to me and said, well, I was talking to him. He says, I can't hear anything. All I hear is static, just static. I can't kill it with my squelch. I mean, it's horrible, horrible static, and I can't hear anything. I said, well, bring it over here and let's take a look at it. Well, he brought his stuff over here, and I said, including the power supply. And so it never even dawned to me that the guy would not have a good power supply. What he had there was a power supply, 12-volt power supply that he got off of an old laptop. And he had squished on some terminals on there, and he was using that. And that power supply, when I disconnected that and plugged into one of my amateur radio power supplies, all that noise disappeared. And then I had another guy come over and said, hey, I need some Anderson power pole connectors, squished on my new power supply here. And he brought me over this another PC power supply. And I explained to him that that's probably not going to work very well. So make sure that you have something suitable on a good quality power supply, not an inverter type that's going to end up making a whole bunch of noise for you. Or there are actually inverter ones that are amazingly quiet too. Next thing is antennas. If you have a good antenna, it can make a world of difference. Get it high above the ground, and get an antenna that has some gain. Your antennas there, we all know gain is magic. It will multiply our transmit and receive signal. If we have a good quality antenna up there that's pushing out, well, actually, if you get into beams, if you get a good quality beam that's up around 12, 15 dB, you can end up turning your 50 watts into 300 watts real easy. And remember, it's reciprocal. What you transmit, if it's going to be if whatever is being received, if it's going to be multiplied by 15 dB, it's also going to be multiplied on the transmit. Really important. So I don't know if anybody has tried buying any pipe lately, but for some reason that stupid kind of metal has just gotten absolutely insane as far as cost. Mast, I went in to pick up a 10-foot section of stuff that was still relatively lightweight, 2-inch, and that was I think $38 for that 10-foot piece of pipe. So whatever you're using for mask, you might check your fellow hams to see if they might have some junk or something laying around there that you might be able to use. But mast and the hardware to mount the stuff all has gotten really, really expensive.
Hey, Mike.
No.
I think Andy, I think wanted to make a comment, but he was on mute. I don't think he knew it.
Andy, you're still on mute there. Andy, you're still on mute. Okay.
Yeah, he's
Okay,
stuck.
we'll continue. Okay.
Okay.
So let's hit up coax here. We're just about at the bottom of this guy here. Coax. I've seen so many new hams put together and put up an antenna using RG58, 100 foot of RG58. So that's that little quarter-inch stuff. Um, it's kind of might be okay on a really short 10-foot run, but 100 feet of that, you're going to lose over half your signal. So a 50-watt transmit is going to drop you down to maybe 20 watts. So it really pays to put some money back into your coax. Get something that has a real low loss. When you get up to that 440 megahertz, the loss that you get in coax gets quite extreme. So if you want to get some energy out of that antenna, you've got to have good quality coax. So you know, I know it's not cheap, but I typically, whenever I'm operating at those kinds of frequency, it's always LMR 400 or some variant of LMR 400 because I just don't like giving up all that power.
My
Yeah.
the RG58 at 100 megahertz is already about 5 dB of loss per 100 feet. And
What's it at 500 megahertz?
at 500 meg, well, this chart I'm looking at goes from 400 to 700, but I'm going to extrapolate probably about 12 or 13 dB.
12 and 13 dB.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, you're talking about, yeah, but maybe 90%, 95% loss or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to put you down to 50 watt output, going to drop you down to pretty close to 10 watts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, Scott. Proves the
Well,
point. Okay, so for me, when I'm buying a system, I'm always looking at the total cost. So that's the cost of the radio, cost of all the accessories, and cost of shipping. If you're doing uh, a mobile radio, then you have other antennas that you need, another antenna you need to put up there. If you're talking about a base station, then you're talking about extra coax, a mast, antenna, and stuff like that. So that can almost equals the cost of your radio by the time you get all of that stuff purchased and up in the air for something like that. When you consider programming your radio, make sure you program it with all of the frequencies you may need. And that's like, even if stuff you don't think you're going to need, it might be just good throwing it in there. Like I always prefer having that NOAA stuff in there. If there's some FM radio stations, I like that. And also I like, police and emergency services to pop that stuff in there. And one of the things that I do more and more stuff is that when I'm looking at product reviews, considering things, I do a lot of online researching and looking at reviews. eHam is an excellent place to look at hams because there you have hams talking about ham equipment. Also, YouTube is a great resource there to help you learn how to operate the equipment and learn a little bit about what you're going to end up buying. So that does it, guys. Got any other questions or anything?
There was one thing I was going to bring up, Mike, and it was I liked your thought process about having a common database, if you will,
Yeah.
and then you share it amongst your radios. Oh, I know what it was. I know for 7QP, what I did is I did two things. One, I created the common list, and I hadn't really tried every repeater in there because I was never in a spot always to be able to try them. Sometimes they were further away,
Yep.
right? They're overpass or whatever. So I'm like, well, I hope it works, right?
Yeah.
And so having good data is like gold. But when I created I use RT systems almost exclusively for my different radios, and I'm able to share between them, just by importing, from another radio. I can import the the data only, and it'll transfer to the different nuances of that radio, which is nice. But what I do is I export a common repeater list and I stick it in the glove box.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really handy, like you said, is the comment fields is on the paper. And you can go see, oh, that's, I have these 8 characters, like you said, or I can have, oh, Hoodoo 440 repeater connected to peak, and it's this really
Yeah.
long comment, and you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. So in your case there, you have to start with that commented delimited list. And
Yeah,
so that's the
I do.
common thing that you use to propagate into all your other programming software. But you
Yeah.
start with that because if you try and pull that stuff back out of the radio, you end up losing those comments. And that's something you don't want to overwrite. But you always start with that commented delimited list with all your
Yeah.
comments and everything in it, and then use that as your common database to program everything.
Yeah.
I have a question, Mike.
Fire.
This is on that coverage map that you were showing us earlier. What software was that you used to make that coverage map? Was that Canadian ham stuff?
No, this was a commercial product. I don't remember what it is. I can look around and see if I can find the name of it. But it was basically one of the things I did here in the valley. We were looking at how we get propagation through the valley, where people can receive a signal from an HT, from a 5-watt HT.
Mm.
And so what I did was go through different parts of the valley with an actual trying to think of the right name for an actual bunny, a fox, fox hunting. There, I used a fox there to do the beaconing, and then I went around the valley and took signal strength readings with my car and worked into different places and wrote all that stuff down and kind of graphed it out where I knew I could get the stuff. And then I took that software and I set up all it takes a bit of work to set up all the criteria, but set it up to map what theoretically it should do for the valley. And then I went and checked it against what I had read, and it was amazingly similar, very similar. I would say that it was probably better than 80, it was better than 80 percentile, better, good enough for everything. So there, I had a pretty reasonable amount of confidence in it. And then it's just a matter of using the same antenna, same description, and then I could very easily adjust to different power levels, and I could see how it would get to the different parts of the valley there. Everything that was marked in green there was areas that was a reasonable amount of reception. The stuff in the yellow was always turned out, when I checked the validity myself, was all the marginal stuff. And so that's where I came up with that thing being pretty darn accurate. I liked it.
Good to know.
Yeah, actually, that software package was really made for FM. So I don't know how much I was taxing it because, that's 100 megahertz area
Oh,
where because it was a commercial product, and so I was pushing it up in the 440 megahertz area.
okay.
And that makes a big difference. Changing that frequency makes a big difference on how things propagate and get around the valley.
So was the online tool by Nautel by any chance?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, because I use that for regular commercial FM radio coverage, and it there's a version of it. I thought that actually they get it from that French Canadian ham, can't remember his call sign, DE2 something. And they just modified it. He had originally wrote it for ham radio coverage for repeaters. And then you could use it for other things too. It didn't have to be a repeater. But it was very useful for that. And then they adapted it for commercial radio, but by just changing the parameters. So I've used it also for ham radio coverage too. The exact same software you're talking about.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm glad you did that.
Yep.
So I'm giving the technician class next or 2 weeks from now, and I'm going to actually show them your maps to show them the difference between a 5-watt handheld in a mountainous, hilly terrain versus, the 50-watt radio.
Sure.
Show them,
I'll go ahead and send those things over to you.
Thank
so
you,
got
yeah.
the high quality stuff. Okay, any other questions? Thank you all.
Excellent presentation, Mike. Thank you very much.